leave it to the character to actually do and say what they want to do. But the fact, as the director, he chose not to subtitle it, to me, was part of its power, because just focusing on the character and how even when he's moving back and forward in some of the, you can understand what his frustration is, and by the intonation what he's trying to say. And I think that's can be sometimes more powerful than actually introducing a dialogue.
Non, pour moi, c'est un moment, bien sûr, très très important du film.
For me, it's obviously a very important moment in the film.
C'est un cri, et donc c'est un cri.
It's a scream.
Et un cri n'a pas besoin d'être traduit.
And a scream doesn't need to be translated.
Mais c'est le cri de tout un continent. Hein? C'est une révolte de tout un continent.
But it's the scream of a whole continent. It's a revolt of the whole continent.
Et il faut que vous le saisissiez comme ça, parce que il y a un monde qui a dominé une partie du monde dans la violence incroyable.
That's how you need to understand it, because there used to be a time where like a part of the world used to dominate another part of the world with like incredible violence.
Et ce continent a été meurtri vraiment par la violence.
And this continent was hurt deeply by violence.
Et parfois, on nous dit, oui, il faut passer à autre chose. C'est l'histoire, il faut passer à autre chose. Mais c'est une histoire très récente.
And sometimes we are being told that it's an old it's history, it's gone, it's done, and we should move on. But it's actually a very recent history.
Et la violence n'a jamais construit quoi que ce soit de positif.
And violence never built anything positive.
Et on ne peut pas grandir par la force de la violence. On peut créer des fausses victoires, en fait.
And violence doesn't make you grow, it only creates fake victories.
Et donc, l'Occident a gagné souvent, mais c'est des fausses victoires.
So the West has often won, but it was just, for me, fake victories.
Il n'y a pas une prise de conscience que nous vivons dans le même monde, c'est un monde unique.
They never got the consciousness that we are living in the same world.
Donc, on ne peut pas avancer en écrasant l'autre. Donc, c'est ça qui a été, et c'est ça qui a été fait.
So you can't grow by damaging a part of it.
Donc, j'ai parlé de violence, mais la grande violence, c'est la violence économique. C'est le contrôle par l'économie.
And the great violence is economic violence. It's the control through the economy.
Voilà. C'est les politiques d'ajustement structurel du FMI, de la Banque mondiale, qui ont quand même fait agenouiller tout un continent, l'Afrique, mais aussi l'Amérique du Sud.
It's the structural policies of both the IMF and the World Bank that damaged a great part of the world, including South America.
Parce que l'ajustement structurel disait un État ne doit pas s'occuper de la santé ni de l'éducation. Ce sont des domaines qu'on a privatisés en Afrique, qu'on a affaiblis, la santé et l'éducation.
Because these structural policies used to say that they shouldn't care about neither health nor education. So they weakened both health and education in Africa.
L'État ne doit pas investir dans la culture.
The state shouldn't invest in culture.
Donc c'est ce qu'on appelle on vous donne de l'argent, mais nous allons vous dire comment l'utiliser.
So we give you money, but we tell you exactly how you should use it.
Tout ce que moi j'ai fait dans ce film, je suis allé me renseigner dans les bibliothèques de la Banque mondiale. Donc ce n'est pas des choses que j'ai inventées. Ça existe dans les bibliothèques de la Banque mondiale, qui se trouvent à Paris d'ailleurs.
When I was making the movie, I actually went to the libraries of the World Bank, so I didn't invent this. I went to libraries that are located in Paris.
Voilà, donc moi je cherche pas à être un juge. Un artiste n'est pas un juge.
So I don't mean to be a judge. An artist is not a judge.
Mais on doit montrer les choses comme elles sont, ça c'est important.
But we need to show things the way they are.
Et ce contrôle continue. Il y a des pays aujourd'hui en Afrique qui se révoltent, qui changent. C'est une réalité aussi.
And this sustained control is a reality up to now.
Et le monde change, donc la Chine existe, d'autres pays existent. Il faut en tenir compte, c'est la réalité.
But now things are changing. Now China exists and has relationships with Africa, and so we need to take into account that these changes are happening.
Mais ceux qui ont fait une politique qui a appauvri le continent, ce sont ces mêmes gens qui vous disent faites attention à la Chine. C'est ça le problème.
But the same people who did the policies to weaken Africa are the same ones that are saying today, oh, be careful about China.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I would like to open to the floor, but John, please have a comment on
15 minutes to go, so.
Yeah,
Really. Pedro Pimenta last week was here, and he said exactly the same thing as you just now.
But he gave an example of
Pedro Pimenta, the filmmaker from Mozambique.
because in, I think he said the 90s, no? Keith, can you remember, was it the 90s where he was talking about when they were, the 90s? Just before the structural adjustment started, he was part of a group from Mozambique. They were traveling in all the post, revolutionary spaces, making images. And at some point, the diktat came from on high to say, okay, we need to stop all this cultural nonsense. because culture is not worth anything. Interestingly, 5 years ago, maybe more, 10 years ago, I was in Nigeria, and I attended an extraordinary meeting with the World Bank, where by then they had changed their mind. They were like, okay, we want culture to be invested. We want to put money into African culture now, but we will only do it on the basis of IP. So if you can show, please now work towards building your IP base, and then we will put money in.
So it has to be an economic investment.
Otherwise they weren't going to do it. Otherwise they weren't going to release the monies that they had clawed back for that purpose. No, I mean, I think there's something remarkable about that sequence. And every time I see it, I think everybody here feels it, felt it. You feel it. You feel, especially once you've seen the film, you've seen all of these masks, impassive, thoughtful, but essentially opaque, clouded in opacity. And then suddenly they are reverse engineered by the African voice. And then suddenly each face becomes an expression, a gesture, a feeling. But 30 minutes before, you're like, oh, okay, come on, Abraham, show us something actually. So as a kind of African denouement, it is very, very, very unusual and very fucking moving because of that. And really, thank you. Every time I see it, I'm so moved by it.
And if you haven't seen the film, definitely, we could only show these few clips, but you need to see the whole film because it is really quite powerful. And there's even much more that will resonate with you. And of course, it is something that you can go on discussing, the role of the artist in even something like this. Many people will know the Western sequence, which is used in such an artistic way to talk about what is happening with people leaving the continent and trying to reach Europe because they have no other option here. I mean, the way it's presented in this film, artistically and in a very effective way. I hope we get a chance to see it. But we're going to stop here and give you the opportunity, please, to make comment or to ask questions of our panelists. So we hope that you've, and this one went first, I think.
Thank you for your excellent work. This has been wonderful. The most eye-opening thing for me was that you said no script. I'm blown away because I didn't know how you did it. If you could talk briefly about how you structured it, how you shot it if you didn't have a script.
Je me suis beaucoup documenté d'abord, donc j'ai lu beaucoup de choses sur la Banque mondiale, sur l'ajustement structurel.
So first, I did a lot of documentation work. I went into the World Bank documentation.
Donc les livres, des études qui ont été faites par la Banque mondiale sur l'ajustement structurel, sur les conséquences.
So I read books, I also read studies about the consequences of structural adjustments.
Donc j'avais énormément, plus de 1000 pages que j'avais.
So I used to have more than 1,000 pages of documents.
J'ai donné ça aux avocats.
And so I gave everything to the lawyers.
Voilà, tous les avocats pour qu'ils sachent de quoi on parle.
So that they know what we're talking about.
Après, le reste, c'est un dispositif.
And the rest is like a concept, like a setup.
Le concept, ouais. Et j'ai écrit 2 pages sur le concept.
So I wrote 2 pages about the concept.
Voilà. La cour,
The courtyard,
l'extérieur de la cour,
outside of the courtyard,
et une scène qui vient de la télé, qui est le western, que je suis allé tourner ailleurs. Voilà.
and one scene that comes from the TV, which is a western, and that I shot outside, like elsewhere.
Voilà, avec Danny Glover,
With Danny Glover,
voilà, qui a donné $300,000 pour le film.
who actually gave $300K for the movie.
Et qui a pris son billet pour venir tourner.
And he took his own plane ticket to come.
C'est un grand monsieur.
So he's a great person.
Et donc, oui, le cinéma, c'est une intention, c'est pas forcément l'écrit, je pense.
So I think cinema is all about intention and not necessarily about what's written down.
Voilà. Donc l'intention, c'est très important.
Intention is pretty crucial.
Thank you, thank you. There were 2 other hands up here. You and we'll take both questions before we come back, please.
Thank you so much. That was really fantastic. I was reminded of the writer and theorist that are also, I believe, from Mali, Manthia Divara's notion that African cinema, many African filmmakers sort of use cinema as a third space in negotiating Western colonialism, histories of colonialism, and identity. I was wondering if, as a filmmaker, that idea of a third space has any purchase on your filmmaking and imagination.
But John could answer that as well. I don't know, is it something that you could... Yeah. Okay, we'll take the second question as well. No.
Thanks.
We'll have to take both because we're running short of time, so it's best if they can answer. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. I come from Mr. Tisako for films. These films mean a lot to me. I grew up in a very poor country in South America, and once I left, if it wouldn't be for films like these acting as catalysts, I probably would have never been aware of socioeconomic or structural racism issues that affect us today. So they mean a lot to me. And my question is, I wonder if there's any personal anecdotes of people who have seen your films and have awakened their awareness that mean a lot to you and that bring you motivation to go forward.
Je pense à Buenos Aires.
So I'm thinking about Buenos Aires.
Oui, ça a été la projection la plus importante pour moi.
It was the most important screening for me.
Et il y a une femme qui a posé une question.
There was this woman who asked a question.
Elle m'a demandé si j'ai pas eu peur de faire ce film.
She asked me, weren't you afraid of making that movie?
Et moi, j'ai pas eu peur. J'ai dit non, j'ai pas eu peur.
So I said, no, I wasn't afraid.
Mais j'avais une traductrice comme elle, hein, donc on me traduisait.
And I used to have a translator, just like me.
Et elle a dit, vous n'avez pas eu peur?
And the translator said, oh, you are not afraid?
J'ai dit non. Et elle a dit, vous avez des couilles.
I said no, and she said, oh, you're ballsy. You have balls.
Et tout le monde a ri, et la traductrice aussi. Et,
so everyone laughed, and the translator as well.
Et j'ai demandé, mais qu'est-ce qu'elle a dit?
So I asked, oh, but what did she say?
Et elle a dit, je ne peux pas traduire.
And she said, oh, I can't translate this.
Donc ça a été un moment très important, et bien sûr, j'ai eu des moments très importants ailleurs aussi.
So this was an important moment, but of course I had others.
Peut-être pendant le tournage, quand on faisait des pauses, l'avocat, les trois avocats de la Banque mondiale étaient rejetés naturellement par les figurants. Les gens n'allaient pas les voir.
For example, during the shooting of the movie, the three lawyers on set during the breaks, they were like naturally rejected by the other actors.
C'est comme si on était dans la réalité.
So it really felt like reality.
Yes, of course. Mattia does talk about the third space, but the third space idea is something that goes all the way back to the emergence of Cuban cinema in the 50s with Solanas and those guys in Latin America talking about cinema. Yes, Latin, but there was exactly, but Mattia's deployment of it comes, I think, much more from Teshome Gabriel's work, pioneering work in the 80s on 13. And I think it's also worth remembering somebody who's now gone, but was very, very important for many of us in the 80s. Figure called Paul William. In fact, Paul and Jim Pines, who organised our conference in 13, are now both gone, sadly.
Yes.
But the work that they did in the 80s on that notion of a third space, a space of imperfection where you don't have to listen to the rules anymore, and you can do what Scorsese was anguishing about to blur the distinction, for instance, between drama and documentary, as Abdurrahman does so perfectly, was part of the move in the 80s.
Thanks. We do have some more minutes, so we're going to take 2 more questions and see how we get on.
This was so moving, and thank you so much. It's been a privilege being here and listening to you as friends speak. I was reminded of the quote when you said a couple of things about the artist is not a judge, but equally this is about truth. And the concept, it was organic because of truth. Charles White's quote, the artist bears an incredible burden, which is to have a deep abiding concern for humanity. He has this burden whether he or she likes it or not, because he's dealing with ideas. My question is, how much more so is the truism of the plight of Africa? 80 years the World Bank has existed, 3 billion people now live in countries where more is spent on servicing debt, trade imbalance debt, than education,